just wanted to let everyone know that we will be recording today's session, but I do have some housekeeping items to go over, so let's start off with those. So due to the number of participants today, we've automatically muted your phones to eliminate any interferences. Please enter any questions or comments into the chat box. If you have something to add to the conversation, please note it in the chat box and we'll call on you. You may also send questions via email to professional@asce.org. Please also turn your video off to avoid sharing your video with the group or being captured in the recording, especially if you're planning on catching lunch right now, right? Please also close all other applications, especially email, so that your system will run smoothly. And then lastly, please keep all conversations geared towards the benefit of the community and today's topic. So with that being said, we have a great team of panelists that are very, very passionate about this subject, and I'm super excited to talk about this topic with them. So we will begin today's roundtable with introductions from those panelists, and then each panelist will share their perspectives and insights on the topic of establishing and fostering a healthy workplace culture. The panelists will also respond to questions from the audience. Again, great panel today, so please make sure you take advantage of their expertise and ask as many questions as possible. So it's now my pleasure to welcome our panelists. We'll go ahead and start off with Jay. Jay, can you introduce yourself first?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Garth. I am a structural engineer with Progressive AE out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was one of the lucky 10 to be chosen as one of the new faces of civil engineering for 2021. So thank you, ASCE. Outside of structural engineering, I work with organizations and nonprofits to address racial equities and increasing the number of Black and Hispanic individuals in places of leadership. And overall, my goal is to increase the amount of Black and Hispanic individuals in engineering, civil engineering, whole nine yard. And I've also participated in leadership programs to address racial equity issues as well. So I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to be part of this conversation.
Absolutely. And if you have not checked out Jay's new face story, it is really inspirational. And that's why we invited him today, because it's really an inspirational story. And, you know, the work that you've done should absolutely be celebrated. So it's fantastic. I'll go ahead and turn next to Preeti. Preeti, can you introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Preeti Guman. I am a licensed civil engineer, and I work at the LA County Sanitation Districts. I've been there over 20 years, and I am super passionate about this topic. I love leadership, organizational development, high-performing teams, and I went back about 10 years ago to get a master's in public administration to specifically study this topic. And I currently serve on the ASCE's Committee on Professional Advancement, and I'm a corresponding member on the ASCE Committee on Developing Leaders. And I just want to give a little disclaimer that these are my personal views today, but I am super excited to be here.
Absolutely, and we are super excited to have you. I'll go ahead and turn next to Caleb. Caleb, can you introduce yourself next?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everyone. My name is Caleb Justice. I'm a structural engineer as well. I work at Kiewit right now. I'm relatively new to the construction world. I spent the last 4 years working in doing entertainment engineering, which is quite exciting. But this topic today is very important to me because I've, certainly had great experiences and, bad ones as well in terms of that, work-life balance and that culture that's created around work. So I'm very excited to talk about it and ready to hear about everyone else's experiences.
Absolutely, sounds fantastic. I think we're all interested in entertainment engineering and what that looks like too. Maybe we can get to that topic later. But Sherry, I'll turn to you next. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Sherry, are you there? Sherry, you might be on mute. We'll give Sherry a few minutes to figure out. I know she's calling in today and doesn't have a camera on her phone, so maybe we can try to troubleshoot. I think well, I can't unmute her, but Sherry, if you could try to unmute yourself and let us know when you've got that fixed, we can go ahead and move on to our kickoff question. And just let us know, Sherry, when you're good to go. So as far as the kickoff question goes, why is healthy workplace culture so important? How does it impact you and your colleagues, both with productivity, efficiency, and work satisfaction? Jay, I'll turn to you first.
I think there are a lot of, there's definitely a lot of impacts as far as, better retention rates in the office, just better company morale, things like that. I think, the one thing that I want to address as far as this question is, with everything that's been going on in this world today, and, for me, I've been working from home for well over a year now. It's, I being at home and working from home, I've realized that it is really easy to translate the energy and the culture that you experience, even working from home. Whether it's good or bad, it's been very easy for me, especially to translate that into the home. And so one of the things, is so obviously with an unhealthy culture, that, with that being able to be translated easily into the home, that can definitely lead to, to some negative things happening inside of your home and whatnot. So, so I think, so as much as there are goods and bads when it comes to, inside the office, which I have a feeling that we're probably going to name probably all of those benefits and downsides with everyone else's answer. But I just really wanted to harp on the fact of just, maintaining a healthy place at home, because in today's world, it's so easy to translate that with us all working from home for, at least for me, for the past year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a different culture in and of itself, is this working from home environment. Preeti, I'll turn to you next. So I know this is one that you have a lot to say about. What is the importance of company culture?
Yes. So I read a study a couple years ago that 40% of female engineers leave the profession mid-career, and most of them cite work culture as the reason. And I was feeling that, and I started interviewing women that I knew. And I embarked on this independent research study, and I found out that it is absolutely true. Almost every woman I have interviewed has a story of microaggression, discrimination, harassment, something, and they are not being able to be their best self at work. So what I did was, that's when I came back to ASE. I've been a member, but I've not been in leadership since college. And I volunteered to work on the Committee on Professional Advancement because I went to University of Illinois 30 years ago. I was part of this Women in STEM movement. It was rah, women in STEM. And I really did not anticipate these things coming up in my career. When I was in Society of Women Engineers in college, I thought they were a little off. I wasn't really sure. So now I've gone back to Society of Women Engineers. I went to the conference last year. In their State of Engineering report, they presented something called the Pinsight Repairing the Broken Rung, which talks about how leadership talent is identified. And basically, it's common that leaders pick leaders like them. And also, I learned that Asian females are the least likely of any group in the United States to get promoted. And that is because of the bamboo ceiling and the model minority myth, which has now come into the news due to Asian hate. But I never knew any of these things. And so I've been working on these issues, and I think it's super important because as a profession, we serve the public, and we need to represent the public that we serve. And that provides better solutions and better outcomes. And we need people. There was a study at Google called Project Aristotle. And the number one thing of a high performing team is this concept of psychological safety, which basically means you feel valued, there's trust, you can be yourself. And that is what really the inclusion part of diversity, equity, and inclusion means. And we have so many work cultures today where people do not feel they can be themselves. And it is unacceptable that 40% of women leave. And we're not even talking about minorities. We're talking about a large percentage of people who graduate in our profession who do not feel welcome. And that is unacceptable for me, for the next generation.
Absolutely. And I just put some research from SWE in the chat box. I know ASCE has done research as well as far as women with salaries and whatnot, as well as part of the ASC salary report. But I see Sherry is unmuted. Sherry?
Oh, I forgot to mention real quick, Teresa. I put in the chat, 2 new movies have come out on this subject. One is Nova's Picture a Scientist, which you can stream online. And that movie talks about how we do not have a pipeline problem. We have a work culture sexual harassment problem. Also, there's another movie called Pioneers in Skirts, which you can stream online, and that's a little more general for all different professions. But those are really powerful tools to open the conversation because the data is there for 30 years. This is not a mystery on why people leave.
Absolutely. I will have to definitely check out those movies, and I hope everybody else does too. But Sherry, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself and share why you think work culture is important?
You bet. Hi, my name is Sherry Newland, and I'm the principal engineer and owner of SNC Associates. We're a small regional civil engineering firm located in Sun Valley, Idaho. We are a we're a woman-owned small business, and I'm honored to be here and excited to be here. I think that I probably bring a little bit different perspective to this group, being an owner of a woman-owned and considered disadvantaged business. So I'm looking forward to this discussion today.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you. Thanks so much for joining us. Caleb, I'll go ahead and turn to you next. Why is work culture important to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, our place of work, that's where we spend the majority of our time, at least 8 hours a day, whether it's, an office building or most people now it's at home and hopefully something more than a folding desk. But that was me for a while. So I think it's very important to, create an environment that's welcoming and gives people, everyone wants to be happy. Everyone wants to feel heard and then, enjoy what they're doing. So, if you're doing that, you're creating, a positive place for people to be in. They're going to want to work more, or they're going to enjoy their work more, and it's going to get them through their day easier. No one enjoys being negative, like being miserable and being in a negative mood. It's going to influence your work negatively. And that's certainly, it was said earlier, we're here to serve the public. We're building things for others to use. And it's important that those are built right and safe. And creating a positive work environment is going to ensure that structures or what we're putting out there is going to be safe and enjoyed by the public. And that's, I find that very important to me. So I'm sure everyone else here does as well. And then also just the retention. People lose, a lot of time is lost for companies when you have to hire new people or find new people. And if you're able to keep more people in the workplace, it's going to just lead to more success for your company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing too, is, it's not just, it's important to everyone, right? It's important to the individual, it's important to the company, it's important to the client, it's important to everybody across the board. So like, it's really something that we really need to talk about and dig into. So there are great video shared in the chat on YouTube about the model minority myth that has been perpetrated in the cinema. And then I also just shared an ASCE series that we did on women in engineering that talked about pretty some of those things, some of those challenges, and definitely the culture, right? And how that needs to change. I'll go ahead and turn to, and just a reminder, please share any of your questions in the chat box. Again, great team of panelists. We really want to hear from you and your questions, and what you want to talk about, right? So here, I'll move on to our next question. How can engineers assess their teams, their departments, or organizations' culture to make sure it reflects their values? Caleb, can I turn to you first for this one?
Yeah, of course. So I think, this can be, difficult. I think like as you move into more of a supervisory role, I think it can be harder to like really have like your finger to the pulse of your team or the department you're in. And also, I think all of us, being engineers or architects or wherever we are, like we're interested in the details. We like diving deep, kind of getting lost in the thicket. And as fun as that may be for people who we are, you lose sight of what's going on around you. And I think what is important in order to assess like the team, your department, the culture you're in, is to pick your head up. And sometimes it's hard getting out of that technical mindset, but seeing everything going on around you, it's those small things that people do that you can see how they really feel. And if you're focusing on all these small details and the technical side, I think it's very easy to miss how someone is feeling, or if you're not paying attention to what you're saying, you can say the wrong thing and negatively affect your coworker. So I think it's paying attention to the small things and not being afraid to take a step back and observe others just to see and make sure that everyone's happy, or making sure that there's no turmoil that's going on that you'd be missed by spending an entire day spinning a recent model around or diving through drawings. That's kind of how I like to think of assessing and making sure that it reflects the company's values or your values.
Absolutely, that's great. Sherry, I'm wondering, do you have anything to add to this question?
So I think the only thing that I would add to this question is that it is important to be present. That it's really easy, as Caleb said, for us to get kind of sucked into our own world and just focus on our task at hand. It's important to take a step back and look at what's going on around you. And making sure that it does reflect what you want to be a part of and what hopefully the culture management is creating.
Absolutely. So I'll go ahead and turn to our next question. I know we've talked about this already, but I think there's always been more to be said on this topic. Women and people of color are considerably underrepresented in civil engineering, as Preeti's already discussed, but how can AEC leaders make their organizations more diverse, equitable, and open to all? Jay, I'll let you lead off with this.
Yeah, so for me, there's really a lot to unpack with this question. Just from the fact that I've been in these organizations that have worked with other organizations, engineering, non-engineering firms, just to address this a situation. And one of the common themes that we see, there's at least two out of these three hold true, is that their way of addressing it is by having in their application process something that mentions equal opportunity employment, or they have a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement on their website, or they've hired some sort of DE&I director or something like that. But the thing about it is that what we're finding out is it's not working. Because when it comes to, workplace culture and making it more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, it's not something you can just market. It's something you actually have to live it. It's something that you have to accept. It's something that you really have to accept. So, in order to really foster that type of environment, everyone from executive leadership to your junior staff, if you have janitors in your office, you all have to be on one accord. Um, you all have to. So number one, you have to, acknowledge and accept the fact that it's a problem in your organization and that it's something that you want to do something about. Second is that you have to understand that, you know, changing your company culture is a very long, tedious process that will cost money. And I'm specifically pointing out that money part. And I'm going to go into a little analogy. But when we think about the history of America and all of the things that were done, all of the politicians that have been in office spending tax dollars, doing research to determine that there's some sort of hierarchy from someone else, that took years and years and years and hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of dollars. And so to think that we can just reverse all of that within the course of a couple of years and just do it off of free labor, no, that's not going to happen. So I really stress out that financial part because I think a lot of organizations are surprised that, they have to really invest their money into making their culture that way. And then the last thing is I have four. So the three is to you got to bring you have to bring on an expert. Like, I know as engineers we can figure everything out, but there are definitely individuals that are trained that will not just take the sole role and responsibility of making your organization, but will walk alongside you and guide you in a direction that leads your company towards being more equitable and inclusive your own way. And then the last thing, I know it's a lot, but I just wanted to share this quick story because this I think this is really important. This is really one of the reasons why a lot of Black and Hispanic people end up leaving organizations. And so, I worked at a company years ago. This is not with my current company, Progressive AE, but a company I worked with years ago. I was working past like 5 p.m. Your typical closing time, and there were coworkers that actually stayed after, and they were playing games, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anyone was there. But as I'm walking towards the bathroom and I'm walking towards this room they're in, I start to hear jokes, and one of the jokes I heard was a joke that were along the lines of racist stereotypes towards Black men. And then there was another joke that came out that went along the lines of anti-Semitism. And everyone was just laughing and giggling. And I just kind of stopped and I looked back in the room and I said, wait, what did you just say? And somebody in there just started, explaining. I call it splaining, just saying a bunch of stuff, but really, really, hey, we're just having fun and games. We get around every so often and do this and blah, blah, blah. And I just said, oh, okay. And I actually kind of left it be because I was actually kind of afraid for myself in that moment. But 5 years later, almost 5 years later, I got an email from somebody that was in that room that day and told me just that the way that I reacted in that situation completely changed his entire life to the point where everything, he even left the organization because of that whole situation. So number 4, speak up. You speak up if there's something wrong. If you don't have to come into the room with your protest sign saying this is wrong, wrong, wrong. You can have a facial expression, you can just say a couple of words, you can something like that. Any mention of that action can really lead a long way in making your organization more equitable and inclusive. Because I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, if a situation pops up like that and nothing is said to address that situation, I mean, silence is compliance. So that was a lot, but I had to get that all out there. So
No, I mean, I think that's the best way that to handle it, right? Is that's how these company cultures keep going, is no one challenges anything, no one says anything, and it just becomes, compliance because, no one speaks up. And that's, you know, that's what you have to change about some of these cultures, right?
absolutely.
Pretty, I'll turn to you next to see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so I will admit that I'm a little late to this party. I grew up not seeing race and gender. I consider myself an American, an engineer. I do not walk in a room and see myself as a female engineer of Indian ancestry. I really don't even notice the other people in the room and put them in buckets. And I know that that's a different perspective, but that is how I grew up. And that is, everyone's unique and brings contributions to the table. And I like that about myself. But it's taken me 20 years and trying for promotion over 20 times and never getting it to realize that there are differences. And I will tell you, on my first day, I went to Berkeley and graduated 5 years after the general manager of my organization. I replaced him on my first day. And I was told that day that he is going to be general manager. And I said, "Oh, how do you know?" And they said, "He's very smart and capable." And I thought to myself, cool, if he can do it, I can do it. Now, the fact of the matter is there was zero chance that I could do it. In 100 years of my organization, we've only had Caucasian males lead. And even today, we've only had one Caucasian female. And even today, all of leadership is basically Caucasian male. So I started on this journey looking at the data. Where are the people like me? They graduated school with me. We went to the same schools. I'm pretty sure it was 50-50 male, female when I went to school. I didn't even consider myself a person of color until an African-American person told me, "You are a woman of color." So I've been on this journey, and when we talk about the bamboo ceiling, that book came out 20 years ago. Never read it, never thought it would impact me. But I've been a natural leader since I was 5 years old. But in my organization, I was never promoted. I felt like I wasn't a leader. So I literally went and got a degree in leadership to realize that I'm a pretty damn good leader. I'm just suffering because I'm an Asian female and nobody sees my talent. So it's been an interesting journey, but what we can do, I mentor a lot of young people and I tell them, go where the leadership looks like you. This has been going on for 30 years. No, you don't hire a couple diverse people and call it a day. You go where the people look like you. And if that is not possible, because until 30% of leadership looks like Jay and I, change will not happen in organizations. So if that is not possible, because I don't think it is possible, because I'm looking for female Asian mentors that are executives that have my personality. And I have found very few around the country, because I think most of them have left. So then if that's not possible, then have the hard conversations. Why is every panel for the 20 years I've gone for promotion been Caucasian males? There's nobody around that looks like me except to the bottom of these organizations. Now, why is that? Let's get the HR data. Let's do an analysis. Let's not pretend we got woke last summer. We've been talking about this for 30 years. And I've even had to confront my universities because I was part of these programs 30 years ago. And they're having diversity presentations doing the same stuff. And I said, this is not bold leadership. We have 40% of women that leave. That is not acceptable for another generation.
Can I add on to that? Because truthfully speaking, this issue is actually starting well before getting into the workplace. This issue is starting in college, actually before college, high school, grade school. There's studies that are still showing that that Black and Hispanic and other people, other underrepresented groups are leaving before they even get there, before they even get to that job. They're changing their majors at high rates. And so I just wanted to add that point on, because I definitely believe that this issue is starting. I'm in agreement with everything Preeti is saying, and all I'm adding on to say is this is starting well before then. So I think addressing this issue isn't also just about what's going on inside of the organization, but we also need to talk about what's going on outside of the organization.
And I'll make one follow-up point. I would be very cautious about DE&I programs. I think they are PR stunts. Real action needs to take place. You don't hire a consultant for $100,000, in my company's case, that works in healthcare, and think you're going to change an engineering organization, which is well known to be one of the worst for DE&I. I mean, I'm working with universities that say civil engineering is the worst because we are the oldest profession in engineering. Our cultures are 100 years old. And if you look at leadership in almost any civil engineering organization, it pretty much is non-diverse. So you can't just pay $100,000 to a person and call it good and hire a couple people at the bottom. No, this is structural change, and this benefits everybody. Everyone wants to work where you can be authentic, you can be real, you can change the world. That's why we went into this profession. This isn't a fixed pie where you lose and I win. This is where we grow the pie. Everybody wins.
Absolutely, that's what it's all about, right? Sherry, I'll move to you next. Do you want to share some of the things maybe that your organization is doing in this lens?
You bet. I think, in all honesty, this is one of the reasons why I started my own business and went out on my own, was because I wanted to grow my career. I wanted to be a leader, and felt that wasn't happening. But I also thought it was important I answer this question because, again, as a business owner, I bring probably as a woman business owner, I bring a little different perspective. At one time, my whole team was women, and now we're at about, there's 57%. So we're a small team, but there's 57% of us are women. One of the big things that I like to think about, or I like to focus on, is, qualifications aside, it's important to remember everybody has a different story we can learn from. I have this amazing team member from Afghanistan. He knows 7 different languages and is probably the hardest working employee I have ever met. And I embrace that. As an owner, I embrace that. I do think there's probably a lot of business owners that shy away from this. So I'm probably out of the norm, and S&C is not the norm with this. But it is about a top-down organization that promotes a culture and promotes minorities into leadership. And multiple, as both Preeti and Jay have mentioned, it's important to see minorities in leadership, because it's that diversity, you know. And there is the hard part is, yeah, there is a box that companies check and say, oh yeah, we are an equal employer opportunity, but we offer that, but they really don't truly live it. So it's really about finding those people and making those people understand that they need to believe this and they need to be vested in it. And what it creates is something really, really spectacular. I know on larger scales, again, like DOTs and large corporations offer those diversity trainings. And I think there is some value to that. I think people walk away learning something, or but again, if it's not something valuable to management, it's not gonna filter through the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to remind everyone that, again, if you have any questions, please ask in the chat. Oh, I see one. That's perfect. Perfect timing. But also, please, if you have your video on, please go ahead and turn it off, because we are recording. So we don't want to capture you in the recording if you're not fully engaged and, you know, ready to be part of the conversation. So here's the next question in the chat box. What are some things that new workforce professionals can do to promote a more diverse management? So Preeti, you talked about that. Jay, you talked about that. What are some of the things that we can do practically as workforce professionals? What are you, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess this is one of the questions we were going to ask later on, but I totally agree with Jay about speaking up. I work in a very conservative culture where I wanted to get promoted. I was told to be a good girl, not open my mouth, don't rock the boat. And you know what? I never got promoted. So now I'm just authentic. So I send emails and I share resources because the data is there. You know, like picture a scientist, share with your management. This is a thing. There was a new organization launched 2 weeks ago called the Asian American Foundation. Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama launched it. There's going to be an event on all Viacom channels around the world tomorrow. Share it with your management. This is a thing. This is not me just feeling a certain way. This is a lot of people feeling a certain way. So there are resources I use, Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Smart Brief Leadership. And when I see things on these topics, you know, send emails, ask the question, why is every panel here Caucasian male? Where are the people that look like me? And then I went to a promotion process where two Caucasian males picked a Caucasian male who has zero experience. And I was told my experience is old. So my experience as old is worth less than no experience. Speak up. That doesn't even make any sense. And I get it, you know, personality. I get you would rather have a beer with this guy than me because I look different, I act different. But that is not diversity. Diversity means I get an equal opportunity based on my merit.
Anyone else? Sherry, I know you kind of talked about building out your teams too, but Jay, what have you done at your organization to advocate?
So yeah, definitely. I mean, speak up is the, at least for me, and I know a lot of people who I can speak for, is definitely, and you have to address things that don't make any sense, or things that just don't fit in that cult and don't have any place in that culture. You know, now personally, when we talking about things that I do within like Progressive AE, you know, one of the things I do is I serve on our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And basically it's just a group of employees who give our time. We also have hired a consultant to also guide us along in our journey. But you know, one of the things that I do is, I talk a lot. I talk a lot. I have conversations with people in that group. I have conversations with management and like conversations like on a 4 to 6 week cycle. Just talking about, I mean, it could be from anything about the culture within the workplace to, you know, to issues outside of the workplace. When the George Floyd situation happened, I probably spent 80 hours in a course of a month just having conversations. And those conversations really lend itself well to within our organization to really understand kind of the next small steps we can do and to understand that, you know, this whole change is not about just things happening within our workplace. I mean, this is really a lifestyle change. If you don't carry this stuff, if this isn't stuff you aren't doing in your life, this is not going to translate well within the workplace. And then, you know, I've also, you know, I take part in education seminars, leadership opportunities, leadership, you know, organizations and training and whatnot. And then, I mean, the last thing I do is I read a lot. And I have a shelf behind my couch with probably books lined up all the way to the back on issues. And there's certain things that I say that I think feel trivial, that I think are trivial and simple. And when someone else hears it, they're like, oh, you know, I never thought about it that way. And so, you know, for me, it's really just, you know, sharing, just it's about sharing my knowledge and not being afraid to have those conversations with you know, staff employees and man and our executive staff. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I'll just like to add on that I have always felt like an other and a misfit. So I understand how hard this is. I am an excellent communicator. I'm an extrovert. Yet when I'm in a room and I'm the only one there that sees things, it is extremely hard to speak up, especially if I'm the lowest person on the totem pole. But if you do not speak up, nothing will change. People don't even know what they're talking about is outside the realm of normal. So until we start having these authentic, psychological, safe conversations, we will not have the healthy workplace that we all want. So I know how hard it is to speak up because I am someone who has every skill to do so, and I did not do that for 20 years. So I understand. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if I can help you in any way on your journey, because it is hard.
Same here. I'll open up my doors if there's things you want to talk about as far as, you know, things that are going on that you're just not comfortable with. You know, that's a skill that I had to learn as well. Um, and again, like, you know, like I reiterated, you know, speaking up does not mean you have to. I mean, it's something that you can do very indirectly as opposed to just bursting in a room and saying, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing this is what you should be doing, blah blah blah. It can be very easy, but it can be very hard as well, just to initiate that. So
Absolutely. I mean, finding your voice is so important, right? Like that's one of the big things. So I'll move on to our next question. And I just put, and actually there's a question in the chat, for Preeti. Preeti, I know just turned your camera off, but there's a question here about the event that you referenced and maybe getting information on that event. Is that something maybe you could share in the chat?
I just put.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. That's fantastic. Awesome. And I did put Jay's story in there because I know, you know, that's helpful and I'm sure inspiring if anyone wants to take a look at that. So here's another question. Preeti mentioned that our industry is pretty conservative. How can we convince leadership to embrace more progressive measures? I'm specifically thinking about normalizing telecommuting. Caleb, I'm going to turn to you for this one. Is this one you can speak to? You're on mute, Caleb. Uh-oh. Because I know this has been a very hot topic for many engineering organizations.
Yeah, it was certainly quite difficult, because I actually left my place of employment, like a past job in July, and then started at Hewitt in July, and there was quite a lot of difficulties that my previous employer had in terms of like sending people home and trying to get that remote, workspace set up, and then you also felt like culture around like the work from home, like I don't know, I just felt drained every day. I mean, hard to sit down at 7 a.m., stand up till 7 p.m. It felt like. So I think building a culture around like promoting like a healthy workspace, even when you're at home, removed from everyone else, is like a significant hurdle that a lot of companies are going to or have been facing. Um, and also, since so much of what we do is in like the physical, like we're building physical things, structures, bridges, wastewater treatment plants, you name it, it's hard to remove yourself from that like interaction. Like so much of our structure has been in-person meetings or site visits, and I think the industry is getting better and trying to work around it and address those issues. But I think it's something that will be difficult, and you'll see varying levels of success over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are some great points. But I mean, that's another part of the culture, right? Is, do you trust your staff to work remotely?
Yeah.
A lot of it is trust and micromanagement and management practices. Sherry, did you have anything to share on that topic?
Sure, you bet. I think it's a great question, and about normalizing telecommuting. Exactly, it is about trust. In my experience, though, it's been interesting as I've tried to navigate this, as I try to mentor young staff and teach them, walk them through some of the things, the everyday things we do, or the programs we're utilizing for design. And what I found is that there's a certain level that telecommuting would work well for, but there's also a certain level that I think it's very challenging for. So trying to find that balance. I think a person with 10 years of experience, I think that could be something you could approach your management with and say, hey, I have the skill set, I know what I'm doing, I understand the company culture. Whereas like, someone coming out of college and just learning the trade, they don't, young individuals sometimes don't even know what questions to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good point. But Pretty, you have your hand up. I'll let you weigh in next.
Yeah, so I am really hopeful. I think the pandemic provides a once in a generation opportunity to make the changes that we need to make. A lot of people have thought about their priorities, reset what they want for their life. We have now had Me Too, we have had Black Lives Matter, we have had Asian hate, we have had a pandemic. It is now time to talk about work-life balance, flexibility, mental health, all these things that we have not talking about, and that I think some of them are considered women's issues, that we take care of our parents, we have kids, all these things that life happens. And this is life we were doing before the pandemic is not sustainable. We need to move forward in a more sustainable way that benefits all of us, that makes us all healthier. And I am feeling really hopeful that we can have the conversations now, or we walk with our feet. We go to the organizations that value us.
Absolutely. And then that brings up a good point, Pretty. Some of those things, like you said, could be considered women's work, right? So the woman took a seat back and, while the man went to work. But now, I mean, we're seeing even within like the area that I live in, both partners have to work,
Well, I've seen stuff with ASCE, like I participate in the LA Younger Member Forum, And we have had sessions on burnout, mental health. I've been to ASC sessions where leaders have talked about suicide. That has never happened in my career before the last year. It's not that those issues did not exist. They existed. They were just hidden. Now is the time that we treat people like human beings, whole human beings, and, you know, bring that to our work. And I think that will make everyone better than this work life we had and our personal life that were separated in a very unauthentic way. Because now we can't unsee so-and-so has kids that run in their Zoom, or so-and-so has, you know, an elderly parent, or someone had a really hard time, someone passed away with COVID. You know, those are opportunities for empathy, and that is how you build connection with people.
Absolutely, and empathy is so important in working with teams too, and how we interact with each other and the success of each other. And it's just, I did one of the top, like, burnout is something that we did talk about on a previous Thursdays at 3. So I did put that link in the chat. Here's another question, and Preeti, I guess you kind of have mentioned this earlier, so this is a good one. How do you ensure that a DE&I program is a beneficial one and not just a PR stunt? What are some things that have worked well for other DE&I committees? And I know, Jay, you've put up a few committees, right? Is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, you want me to speak, or do you want to start?
I would just say that I agree with what Jay said, and I've done a lot of personal research, and there's a lot of data out there, and so I've offered to help my company's DE&I program, but one thing to note is there's not, engineering and technology is noted to be one of the worst for this. Other professions like healthcare and law have been working on this for longer. So I think it's really important that if you're going to hire a consultant, that they have experience in engineering or technology. Because if you read Harvard Business Review, there are literally 10% of women engineers. And I don't even know how many women of color. It's probably like 1%. So, I mean, you cannot go in there with a DE&I program that is based in a sector that looks nothing like ours. So I guess do your research. And I think that's an opportunity where I feel like the more we talk about it, the more these things are gonna, we're gonna develop tools to help address these things.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, the way that I ensure that at least ours is not just some type of stunt is, I take personal responsibility to hold the committee, and to hold to hold anyone who mentions anything about DE&I and any initiatives. I make sure that I hold them first accountable. Because I mentioned that one of the signs is that there's this huge one of the signs that it's kind of a PR stunt is that there's this huge announcement that there's a huge announcement of this person being brought on as director of DE&I, and it's all sounds great and a move forward, and then 2-3 years later that person has resigned because there hasn't really been any progress in the organization as part of. So I would definitely say, if you have that type of organization, if you have that type of committee in your organization, take that responsibility to make sure you're holding everyone else accountable. Have those conversations with, because now these committees, typically you're not going to find that many. You'll find some executive, at least from my experience, and this is all anecdotal. From my experience, I've seen a lot of involvement from staff, employees, or whatnot, and maybe one or two executive level teams, executive level members. I'm sorry, goodness, I've been talking all day. Executive level people in those meetings, they pop in, when they get their chance. And one thing that I at least try to do is, I try to at least have a sit down, have a conversation, whether it be about, moving a company forward in, whatever initiative that we have, said that we're going to go towards, or even just, or sometimes these conversations get personal and we just talk about, things that are happening in the world, and that also kind of gauges, that also kind of gauges, at least for me, that gauges, if is this something that they're just coming into the office and turning on and then they go home and turn it off, or is this something that is this a lifestyle they are really, embracing and moving towards for the rest of their lives.
I forgot to mention something. So one thing is you need to start with your why. What are we trying to do here? And we are engineers. Make it data-driven with performance metrics. And start 30 years ago. Like I said, this is not something new in engineering. I was in these programs 30 years ago. I know they exist. I know they existed. So look at who has come into your organization over the past 30 years. What are your promotion statistics? What are your demographics? And what do you want them to be in 5 and 10 years? Because I will tell you, the new generation is not waiting another 30 years to have leadership that looks like them. They will go or start companies, like Sherry said, if these workplaces do not modernize. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. So we've only got 3 minutes left, so I'll go ahead. We should share some closing thoughts. I'll go ahead and turn to Sherry first. Sherry, can you go ahead and maybe take about 30 seconds to wrap up today's conversation on healthy workplace culture?
You bet. Healthy workplace culture is extremely valuable. I mean, we spend so much time at the office, a majority of our time during the week, that it needs to be a place where we are authentic, genuine, and real, and embrace whatever diversity, and embrace all diversity. And if we've mentioned numerous times, the panel has mentioned, silence is compliance, and that's true. It may just be an email to your manager saying, hey, you know what, I'm feeling this way, can we talk about it? But again, managers may not even be aware, so it is important as an individual to bring that up to management, to at least start initiating change.
Absolutely. Sorry, my microphone was stuck on mute.
Oh.
Caleb, do you want to go ahead and share your closing thoughts next?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I've really enjoyed being a part of the panel today, and it's been really interesting, like hearing everyone's stories and express like the frustrations they've had and the issues, because I do think there is like a systemic problem in construction and engineering, and everyone's trying to change and varying level of success. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done. But I think it's very important to be creating, an environment that is welcoming to everyone. Like, I don't know, I want to be working next to someone who's happy and enjoying where they are and doesn't feel like they're not heard, or, they're being looked down on. No one wants to do that. We're all humans at the end of the day, and we want to connect and be happy. So I think it's creating that culture is paramount for a company's success, and hopefully we start seeing it and things start moving in the direction that they should have been moving in 30 years ago. But it's been good to be part of the board, and thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. It's all about, happiness and and work, like it's just work, right? Like it really is about your personal well-being. It's really what it comes down to. Preeti, I'll turn to you next. You want to share some of your closing thoughts?
Sure. We are part of an amazing profession. I wanted to be a civil engineer since I was a little girl because we get to help people and build really cool things. And we need to figure this out because getting young people into our profession is not that hard. Give me a classroom and I can motivate half of them to do, science. We do really amazing things. So we need to work on this workplace culture issue so people feel like they can contribute their authentic self, and we can solve the challenging problems that we have that we need to solve.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fantastic point. Jay, I know we're right at 4 o'clock, but I'll let you close out this discussion. What are your closing thoughts?
I've really enjoyed this discussion. If I'm gonna add anything, I just want to reiterate my point with about speaking up. Um, I've been part of surveys, and I've seen results of surveys of organizations that have about diversity, equity, and inclusion in their workplace. And what we've seen across the board is at least 80 to 90% of people within organizations that were polled said that they believe that they do what they can to foster an environment that's equitable and inclusive. But then when you ask the question of, do you know what to do when a situation arises where those values are being violated, over 50% always say that they don't know what to do. And it is so simple as just to speak up. Speak up for exactly for what you want. If there is a direction that you would like for your workplace to go, being more equitable, more inclusive, healthy, even things with, like we were talking about, with work-life balance and flexible schedules, you got to speak for it. You have to say something. Otherwise, I mean, again, if you don't say anything, then to me that sounds like you're okay with what's going on.
Absolutely. That's such a great point. Well, that was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate all of the panelists for their time today and sharing such great insights. For ASC members, I want to remind you that you can continue this conversation in ASC Collaborate at collaborate.asc.org. And then for those of you who are not yet members, I'd be happy to talk with you about the benefits and resources that ASCE provides. Please contact me at taustin@asce.org if you have any questions about ASC membership. And I will be sharing this recording out for you all earlier next week, along with the links in the chat, like has been requested. So thanks again. Fantastic panel, fantastic conversation. And I think there may be some ideas for future discussions out of this conversation.